Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we're celebrating the DEIS Impact Keynote with Germaine Ingram and violinist Diane Monroe. This is a very exciting evening, as you will definitely witness. This event is the centerpiece of a week-long festival of social justice, which continues through Sunday. We hope that you will explore these expressions of social justice in many dimensions and attend others of the 50 events happening throughout the week. My name is Jennifer Morazes, and I am the director of the Student Support Services Program, or SSSP. SSSP is a program of scholars at Brandeis that supports 150 students who have overcome significant barriers to higher education. Brandeis distinguished itself among highly selective universities for the length and depth of its commitment to first-generation college students. We are proud to co-sponsor this event as part of our 25th anniversary that we are celebrating this year. The scholars in our program see social justice in many different venues and dimensions. They study in the service of social justice in many ways and see many connections. For this reason, it's relevant that SSSP co-sponsors this event tonight. And you will see how Germaine Ingram and Diane Monroe celebrate social justice through the arts and law and make these connections. And I also have someone in my family who's both a lawyer and an artist, so it's personally relevant to me. I'll now turn this over to Interim President Lisa Lynch.
Thank you, Jennifer, and congratulations on 25 years for your program. Welcome, everyone, to this evening's lecture and performance. I have to say that one of the most important events for me over the course of the academic year is DEIS Impact. The fact that this is student-organized, student-led, but brings in so many members of our community into the many different events that happen over the course of the week, for me, shows our community coming together in innovative, creative ways, and that hopefully will expand our thinking and bring our community closer together. At a moment of time in the history of our country where we are re-examining and confronting realities of racism and racial injustice, I can't think of some more powerful performance than what we heard yesterday with Germaine and her colleagues. And for those of you who were able to participate, and it really was a participation even for us that were watching the performance, in that performance, we were challenged in our thinking about the stories that we hear about racism in this country, and in particular the voices of women that are not always brought out as we talk about race and racism in our country. So I'm thrilled that we have this evening's event. I'm delighted to see all of you who have turned out, and I just got to say, I wish we had more people here in the audience this evening, and I think it's important for our community as we're confronting our own issues of racism and racial injustice on our campus to find ways that we can bring more people into events like this so that together we can examine these issues. Having said that, I want to turn to one of our most wonderful leaders here on campus, Nia Macklin, who will introduce this evening's artists. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I hope that you are having a wonderful day. It's a little rainy out, but it's still a gorgeous time and a fantastic time to be engaging in social justice on our campus. So, again, my name is Nia Macklin, and I'm the student body president. I appreciate you guys. And I have been lucky enough to serve on the steering committee of DEIS Impact. where I've been able to speak, think about, engage with some of the brightest and most creative minds on our campus who are trying to think about ways to put social justice into action right in our hometown. So DEIS Impact, like Lisa said, it's a student-led and student-organized festival of social justice that happens right in our community. And because of that, our students have been able to confront the most complex and controversial issues, most of our controversial issues that our nation is engaging with right now. DEIS Impact to the students means giving a voice to the voiceless. And I am so excited to be able to continue that work with issues with our fellow students. So I would like to introduce today, I know that you guys aren't here to listen to me, but really to Ms. Germaine Ingram. She's absolutely fantastic. If you haven't seen the work that she's doing with jazz, tap, modern dance, and bringing the arts and bringing social justice together, then you're in for a real treat tonight. Without all further ado, I'd like to bring her up. So thank you very much.
Comes the hair most every night, easing them knits and tangles, freeing them stealing barbs. Comes the hair most every night, scared that you fuss and holler, yell that I tugs too hard. I combs the hair most every night. In the full moon I dream that eyes open, and I take them falling strands and winds a trick that makes her set me free. Scent from chin to foot, serving all day the missy gets in my every root. Ah, where's her scent from head to toe? Blind man to tell between us, for him be hard to know. Ah, where's her scent? Ah, where's her scent from head to toe? When I biz with my man, he treat me cold. He turn his head away and say, I smells like master's hound dog on a stormy day. I scrub my limbs till knuckles fray. Done what Mrs. Saint, but Mrs. Saint don't go away. I know her thoughts before she speaks. Little she knows her secrets are mine to keep. I knows her whims, and I knows her moods. I act like the things she tells me, pretend that they're all is news. I knows her thoughts, I knows her thoughts before she speaks. I can see in her dreams, I knows her schemes, just 'cause I slow to speak. Don't mean my mind is weak. They say I should be glad she favors me, but I'd rather be a stray dog and be free. I'd rather be a dog without a bone. I'd rather be a hound without a home. I wanna be free. I gotta be. That was only a song. I wrote that song for a project that reflected on the practice of slavery. At the President's House, America's first White House, the executive offices and residence in Philadelphia of George and Martha Washington during the Washington presidency. Oney Judge was one of the enslaved Africans who were transported to Philadelphia from Washington's plantation in Mount Vernon, and served them in a house that, ironically, had slave quarters just a few steps from where the Liberty Bell stands today. Oni was Martha Washington's body servant. She bathed her, did her hair, dressed her, tended to her when she was sick, accompanied her on social outings. Historical accounts suggest that Oni was a special favorite of Martha's, and that when Oni escaped, Martha hounded George relentlessly about capturing her and bringing her back. I imagine the internal tension between pride that Oni might have felt at being the trusted personal servant to the most revered woman in the nation, the affection she might have felt for someone who had essentially raised her, and the frustration, anger, and resentment she must have carried as a result of being in bondage to Martha Washington. After one of the first times that I performed Oni's song, a 7-year-old girl came to me after the show and asked whether she could ask me a question. As I bent down to listen, she asked, "Do you think that Oni and Martha could be friends?" I was so struck by the maturity and profoundness of her question that a 7-year-old could take away some appreciation how human instincts for attachment and caring can be corrupted and poisoned by a brutal institution like slavery, was great encouragement that my art making could generate empathy and curiosity, that it could be storytelling that builds a bridge between private longing and the outside world. Law engages in a different sort of storytelling. I was preparing some documents in what was called the war room at the litigation firm where I was a partner for about 8 years. The head partner walked in and stood across the table from where I was sitting. He was in an iron-jawed snit over a memo I'd written advising him that he had next to zero chance of prevailing in a case that he was handling on behalf of a quite sympathetic couple. The Pennsylvania court precedents didn't support him, and indeed there was a case that went against him that was very similar on the facts to the ones that he was litigating on their behalf. He was unhappy with my conclusion. I assured him that I didn't create the precedent, but tried to comfort him by saying how important and meaningful it was that he had given the couple a caring and sympathetic ear when other lawyers had dismissed them, and that he could do them a great service by helping them to understand that the law does not provide recourse for every injury, and that there were more productive ways to use their time, energy, and emotions than striving for an elusive legal victory. He responded sharply, "None of that matters to me. I want to win." Law engages in adversarial storytelling. Your story has meaning if it can be framed and packaged into legal constructs that give you a reasonable chance of winning. Lawyers strive to typecast the elements of a case to fit the relevant considerations prescribed by legal statutes and court precedents. Clients, conditioned by media and popular culture to perceive litigation as the preeminent form of conflict resolution, might be predisposed to configure and tell their stories in terms that they think conform to the narrative conventions of the law, conventions that emphasize fault, agency, intent, foreseeability. Given its specialized nature, adversarial storytelling tends to give judges and juries limited options for resolving conflicts. The late Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black used to tell a story that exemplifies this point. It goes like this. A jury in a rural town in Alabama had the duty to render a verdict on a case involving a poor farmer charged with stealing a mule from a rich farmer. The jury brought back its verdict, not guilty, provided he returns the mule. The judge rejected that verdict on the ground that it was too conditional. The jury deliberated again and came back with a second verdict. Not guilty, but he has to return the mule. The judge rejected this verdict, saying that it was inherently contradictory. The jury deliberated again and came back with a third verdict, which the judge accepted this time. Their verdict was, not guilty, let him keep the damn mule. By the time I left law practice in about 2002, there had already been significant narrowing of the opportunities for regular people to tell their stories in the legal arena. Restrictions on and underfunding of legal services programs for the poor place rigid limitations on the ability of poor people to use the courts to push for systemic change and redress large-scale wrongs. Court decisions on issues of standing, justiciability, statutes of limitations, governmental immunity, and what constitutes a legal controversy place new limits on access to courts. Statutes like Stand Your Ground and immunity for gun manufacturers created new shields for individuals and corporations against accountability for the foreseeable consequences of their actions. In the past decade, there has been an explosion of the use of mandatory arbitration clauses, clauses that bar plaintiffs from having their claims decided by judges and juries in federal, state, and local courts, and force them to take their claims to a private arbitration system that seems heavily weighted in favor of corporations. Look closely enough and you'll find these clauses buried in the microscopic print of all kinds of consumer and employment agreements for credit cards, cable or internet services, rental cars, cell phones, online shopping, medical services, nursing home care, travel services. For those of you in the job market, look closely at the employment agreements you're offered. You might very well find clauses that shut you out of access to courts for violation of the contract or discrimination or sexual harassment. Even with claims that are amenable to legal process, I sometimes found that the legally achievable outcomes were not well matched to what my clients felt were their primary interests and objectives. I had a client, I'll call him Dr. In, who was a pathologist from the Indian Ocean island of Mauritius. He had immigrated to the United States after his training and a good many years of practice. At the time he consulted me, he was working as a staff pathologist in a large Philadelphia hospital system. I recall that his hobby was researching the medical conditions of classical composers. He came to me with stories about how he worked burdensome hours without recognition or commensurate compensation, stories of being given the most onerous and unpleasant assignments without support that was customary for his department, stories of being denied the benefits and privileges received by employees with education and experience comparable to his. I got busy fitting his stories into the usual legal constructs: contract violation, age discrimination, ethnicity and nationality discrimination. The hospital lawyers rolled out all their adversarial storytelling designed to counter any possible legal claims. It took me a while to understand that what Dr. In really wanted was not the standard currency of legal cases. Much more than money, he wanted to be seen and acknowledged as a hardworking and loyal employee and a dedicated professional. Ultimately, we negotiated for the currencies that the law offers and then translated them into what Dr. In really valued. We negotiated a monetary settlement, and Dr. In donated all of the money back to the hospital with very specific stipulations on how it would be used to promote care and comfort for patients. I am grateful to Dr. N for his persistence in making the legal arena yield to interests and values that are not usually their concern. Transformation. I'm suspect of transformation in law and in art. If the Supreme Court decisions of the 1950s and 60s transformed the legal landscape for people of color seeking education equality, why in 2015 did a Supreme Court justice ask during oral arguments on an affirmative action case whether it might be better for Black students to go to a slower track school where they do well, or where they aren't being pushed ahead in classes that are too fast for them? Why, more than 50 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, are schools more racially segregated than they were in 1968? Why do I feel that legally induced transformations rarely go as far as they need to, and rarely last as long as they should? In the 1980s, while employed with Community Legal Services in Philadelphia, I represented a class of about 200 African American men in employment discrimination claims against the union that represents people in the ironworkers trade and a defendant class of heavy construction contractors who employed ironworkers on their heavy construction projects. My clients' claims challenged exclusion from the union's apprenticeship program, denial of journeyman status and the higher pay that came with it, being passed over in the union hiring hall, and being denied long-term jobs. After a few years of litigation, we reached a consent decree that rewrote the hiring hall procedures, opened up apprenticeship slots to minorities, advanced qualified Blacks to journeyman status, and ensured that Black workers got a fair share of the long-term jobs. It also resulted in lump sum monetary payments to most of the plaintiffs. Many called this result transformative, not just for the local ironworkers trade and for the economic status of hundreds of Black men and their families, but also for many whites who suffered from the nepotism that was rife within the union and the construction industry. Mr. Jackson was representative of many in the plaintiff class. The consent decree gave him his first steady employment in years, allowed him to move from a small third-floor walk-up apartment into a house of his own. He was able to get out of debt and to buy a nice suit to wear to church. A decade or so later, Mr. Jackson was living in a shelter. The changes in the industry did not hold much beyond the 6-year term of the consent decree. By the time the decree expired, Congress had imposed new restrictions on legal services programs that virtually eliminated the plaintiff's capacity to bring a new class action lawsuit. So much for transformation. Transformative has become almost a cliche in the arts arena, especially as terms like art for social change, creative placemaking, and socially engaged art have come to command university degrees, government grants, foundation funding, and museum gigs. Yet I find little to help me understand what type and measure of change is necessary in order to be transformative, or how long a change needs to last in order to consider a person, place, or thing transformed. I think of art experience as a liminal space, a space in between, or a transition between two states, like ritual. Authentic ritual, itself a type of performance, is a process of conscious entering, yielding to some force larger than self, and exiting in a changed state, whether momentary, short-term, or lasting. Artists and participants share a sense of ownership for what happens. Rather than inviting audiences to sit back and relax, we urge them to lean forward, to shape the space by their imagination, patience, curiosity, and awareness. As artists and audiences, we return again and again for renewal, for reconnection with a sense of community, for reciprocity, for new possibilities of understanding and empathy. Law seeks the single story. The single story that declares someone a victim or a villain, as innocent or guilty, as faultless or responsible. Bryan Stevenson, whose bestseller, Just Mercy, recounts the lessons of 3 decades spent representing the poor, the incarcerated, and the condemned. He tells us that we've institutionalized policies that reduce people to their worst acts and permanently label them criminal, murderer, rapist, thief, drug dealer, sex offender, felon. Identities they cannot change regardless of the circumstances of their crimes or any improvements they might make in their lives. Stevenson says that his experience in the criminal justice system has taught him a vital lesson. Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. Art, at its best, embraces complexity and uncertainty. Indeed, its purpose, as James Baldwin reminds us, is to ask the questions that are covered by the answers. The work of artists is to animate the space between convictions and uncertainties. And like visual artist Ann Hamilton says, art invites us to engage in not knowing, engage with waiting and finding, recognizing that not knowing is not ignorance. Rather, it involves work and research. It is a permissive and rigorous willingness to trust, leaving knowing in suspension and trusting in possibility. Yesterday, Diane Monroe, who has joined me tonight, Jacqueline Pickett and I gave a performance that channeled the internal lives of Southern women in the last year of the US Civil War. One piece imagines the grip of not knowing, yet the faith and possibility of a woman just learning that the scourge of slavery has been lifted. She asks, "Can I believe?" Can I believe these eyes can gaze wherever I choose? Can I believe these feet can just stand still, or walk or run or dance or fly wherever legs can move? Can I believe these hands can rock the cradle of my own baby? this tongue can speak my own name. And I believe this voice can sing my own blue song. Can I believe this body can be mine to give or to withhold? Can I believe that words alone can heal the keloid scars of ages of torment and betrayal? Can I believe the call to rid my soul of fear that grips me night and day? Can I believe? 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 A couple of weeks I was talking with Professor Cindy Cohen about whether it is possible to make institutional truth and reconciliation procedures porous to the kinds of strategies that artists use for storytelling, whether story circles in the way they are used by John O'Neill and Deadly Cock, or the storytelling structures developed by Ping Chong for the Undesirable Elements Project, or the kind of theater created by Anna DeVere Smith, might suggest ways of opening up legal and institutional processes to narratives that don't fit rigid legal constructs, but nonetheless need to be heard in order to increase the prospects for conflict resolution, reconciliation, and peace. I think I was a bit more sanguine about the possibility than she was. But we both agreed that because we are so dependent on systems of laws, art, among other disciplines, must offer other places to share the narratives that demand to be told and heard. However we might be typecast in the legal domain, winner, loser, victim, perpetrator, innocent, or injured, we need something more than law affords to affirm our humanity. More perhaps than even justice. I agree with scholar Judith Butler when she says, a legal framework does not do justice to passion and grief and rage, all of which tear us from ourselves, bind us to others, transport us, undo us, implicate us in lives that are not our own. I return to the powerfully resonant words of lawyer, author Brian Stevenson, who represents not only people who have been unjustly convicted, but also people who have committed heinous crimes. He says, I believe it's necessary to recognize that we all need mercy, we all need justice, and perhaps we all need some measure of unmerited grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Was faith, was grace that taught my heart to feel. Was grace my fear relieved? How precious did that grace appear when first I did believe. When this heart and social fails, and mortal life shall cease, I will possess within the veil the joy of peace. sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now, but now, but now, but now, but now, but now. But now I see. Diane Monroe.
Let's give another hand to Germaine and Diane for their wonderful performance. So we've heard about transformation and not knowing and mercy and justice and grace. So we have some time now for some question and answers with the performers tonight. Anyone want to be the first?
Thank you. First of all, that was beautiful, so thank you for your performance and speech. One of the things I picked up on that you talked about was you referred to art a lot, obviously as transformative, but also as a process of not knowing. And so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on whether or not you think that the not knowing and even the transformative capacity of art scares people, and maybe that's why people are reluctant on some level, whether conscious or not conscious, to participate in it, or is that what attracts people to art, or is it both?
I think as a society, we're fearful of not knowing. I had this wonderful conversation with the student support students last night, and some of them talked about the tension between their expectation that coming to college would give them a space of essentially not knowing, of just being in an active space of learning. Without necessarily any instrumental goals. And they're finding that they're being sort of channeled into courses, into roads, into expectations that will possibly lead them to a job or to a career, but don't really satisfy their desire to be in a space of inquiry and curiosity. And we find that situation, that analogs of that situation in so many situations. As an artist, having to apply for grants, I mean, I'm asked, well, what's going to happen at the end? What's going to happen in a year? What's going to happen in 2 years? Well, I don't know. I can tell you what interests me, what motivates me, what excites me. But if you want real art, then you have to trust that my skill, my inquiry, my sense of inquiry, my habits of mind and habits of spirit are going to take me to a place that's of value to not only me as an artist, but of value to the broader community. But it's hard to find those situations, funding situations that allow that kind of process to evolve. So I'm not quite sure how to answer your questions. As an artist myself, I keep sort of trying to push the possibilities for engaging in really risk-taking, vulnerable process. In the process of discovery, without a specific intention at the end, that the process itself is the product. That powerful, risk-taking, vulnerable process is valuable in and of itself. And I think we need to just keep delivering that message, because this sort of end goal seeking doesn't seem to be getting us where we need to be.
Hi, this is loud. I have to step out in a second, but before I did, I thank you so much for being here today and just sharing so many versions of yourself. My question was about sort of what sorts of, I don't know, to what extent do you understand yourself as sort of performing and embodying this sort of blues legacy and kind of being in touch with those sort of ancestors and those sort of experiencing pain and vulnerability and not knowing through sort of performing that. So that was my question.
Well, I certainly hope that I am embodying that. I came up at a time that that legacy was really important in my family and in my community. It took me a while to understand why my father, when he was doing social dance, would be looking to his right. I was, well, why is he looking to his right? Until, I started recognizing that that's so African. And, I don't know to what extent he recognized that gesture was a transmission of Africanism that he brought from Georgia to Philadelphia. But that's in my DNA. And the sense of musicality, of growing up in a household where, like Diane, we listened to Bill Doggett and Dinah Washington and Ella Fitzgerald, as well as classical music, and being mentored by just an extraordinary street dancer, extraordinary tap dancer, who never studied, never studied with anybody. He learned his art form on the streets of Philadelphia, but had such a unique sense of physical intelligence and a unique sense of musicality that no one could have taught him. And his willingness to impart that to me over 25 years. You know, I dance nothing like him now, or the way I danced when I danced with him during those 25 years, but that's still in me. So, you know, I hope I share all of those things, not necessarily consciously, but you know, that's part of being vulnerable, to show those, who pull back those layers of self and show that history.
Hi. Thank you for a wonderful performance. It was really thought-provoking and moving, and it's a real privilege to have seen yesterday's and then today's performances. I had a question about how it is you two collaborate between the choreography and the subjects of the performance and the music. It's you know, something that you wonder when you're seeing how this performance is so well meshed together. So I'd love to hear more about that.
I'll just talk a little bit, and then I'll let Diane talk. It's Diane and I, you know, we've known each other as performers for a long time, but we only began to work together about 4 years ago. And for me, it's just so wonderful to work with someone that whose artistry and genius I trust so much. I feel like I could walk onto any stage with her and be supported by her artistry, by her intention, by her generosity. So that, you know, that's the foundation. I feel that's the foundation of our work. And then, you know, the process comes on top of that, but without that foundation, it would be useless.
That's correct. That is correct. I concur. And also that foundation is very rare to find, which is really strange, but true. In this music world today, as the non-artists become artists somehow, it's very difficult to find that camaraderie, the interaction and the joy of the sheer purity of the gift that comes through. And I know Germaine's played with many musicians, and I've admired her for quite some time, and I feel very, very, very fortunate to that she's invited me into her circle. And I'm very, I treat her melodies that she composes very seriously, because I love those melodies and they resonate with me on so many levels. You know, on that traditional blues level, on the level of a woman and what she says through, even with the lyrics, and so within that context, you know, I don't know how it happens, but I don't know. I remember the first time you what did you do? You sent me an MP3 of this song that we love so much.
Who Needs Her?
Who Needs Her? Yeah, and or maybe you sang it for me in person. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But I just remember the first time I heard the melody, however it was, I just almost cried. And it was so moving. And also that the connection shone through in that almost immediately somehow I just heard something in it in order to write it down in order something came through me. But it came through really fast. It didn't come through like, oh, let me see, I'll pick this chord, and then I'll go over here and pick. It was like composing, because that's the way a collaborative thing is, you see. And so, and when it is, a reciprocation all the way around, it's just a joy, it really is. And it teaches me too, and it stretches me, because I don't do that every day. I compose on my own, but it's, either for solo violin or for, quartet, mostly instrumentalist. Anyway.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I so appreciated seeing this and sort of expose into the many sort of sides that clearly mean so much to you. And I wanted to address what you talked about with regards to the legal system. You talked about how limiting it can be as far as not allowing for the narratives and expressions that really reflect the human side of the people who are acting and involved within the legal system. And I wanted to know if you see any potential for change in that and for moving the legal system in a direction that does account for more human discourses and reflection of values and people that are more real than sort of is currently expressed by it.
Well, as a cockeyed optimist, I am not without hope, but it's slim. As I was suggesting in my talk, I just see the system getting narrower and narrower. And one of the reasons that I left the active practice of law in 2002 was I saw, lawyers doing things that made me ashamed to say that I was a lawyer. I'm inspired by people like Brian Stevenson. There are lawyers that I respect profoundly who fight against the crudeness and the limitations of the legal system and try to hack some measure of sound process and justice out of them. But I think we need to work hard to develop alternative systems, to develop our capacity for advocacy and determining alternative communities and structures for finding some measure of humane existence. Because I don't, not in my lifetime I expect there to be major changes in the legal system. I think that I think it's going to get narrower for a while. This explosion of arbitration, of private arbitration, that's not something that's going to go away in the short term. And what that is doing is just shoving. We talk about as Americans having our day in court. No more. And that's not going to. I don't think that trend is going to end soon. So we need to find alternative ways to resolve our conflicts. And frankly, I think that African Americans have been too trusting in the capacity of the courts to provide us with justice and opportunity. And we're going to have to find other structures. I was talking about the ironworkers case and what happened there. And when we entered into the consent decree in that case, I said to my clients, I said, well, this is time limited, and what you need to be doing is acting politically within the union, finding allies within the union who appreciate the changes that this consent decree is bringing about, not just African Americans, but white colleagues. Because as I suggested there, you know, the construction trades are rife with nepotism. And so there are many white workers who are hurt by that as well. You need to be establishing alliances with those people so that there's a sense of common interest in bringing about some permanent changes in this system. But, people start getting good jobs and get accustomed to a better life, and this notion of working politically, that hard work of building alliances and finding common interests and finding common ground and establishing common agendas just didn't happen. And so when the consent decree ended, there was no possibility of going back for another legal round, and there was no alternative that have been developed during that 6-year period.
I want to make sure I'm not neglecting this side of the room. Are there any questions over here? Okay.
Hi, thank
Hi.
you so much for being here, sharing with us. I really have a deep appreciation for storytelling, so I'm so grateful that you came. I was thinking about how you were explaining the structure around stories in the legal system and how it had to fit a certain way of having the potential to win. And since leaving your practice, I wanted to know, in what ways do you still confront those ideas of structure, and how do you go about undoing it with your art form and your storytelling?
Well, as I've said to people over the last few days, I don't regret at all being a lawyer, having been a lawyer for 30 years. And I learned a lot in that process. I learned a lot about looking at a whole array of factoids and constructing a truth out of them. And that was good practice for creating the kinds of narratives that I do today, looking at loads of research and trying to extract from that research material that tells a story that responds to my curiosity and responds to my passion. So I don't see a demarcation between those two careers, but I've always thought that the law was a crude tool for seeking justice, and so I feel blessed to have the opportunity now to create narratives in a different way that include different voices and different stories, and stories that grow over time. Not stories that are limited by this notion of, you win or lose at the end of a hard litigated process of a year or two. Mm-hmm.
First of all, I want to thank you. Among the many other gifts that the two of us gave you, I just want to call out that spectacular version of Amazing Grace, which helped me see in the way that you did it the the real pain and agony of seeing. Usually we think of that song bringing kind of joyous light, and you've helped us see that the seeing, that the work of seeing and really seeing the world as it is painful and difficult, and the version that you did together really helped draw that out and call that out. I really appreciate that. Very, very moving. Secondly, your appearance here follows by less than a week that of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was on campus. And first of all, I'm pleased to see that both of you are very concerned about the fine print in credit card agreements, and because she actually talked about the very same
really?
issue, the identical issue
Oh,
that you
man.
raised, the problems of arbitration, the ways in which consumers are not protected, and that injustice is being slipped in. So you share that.
That's a gift from lawyers in Philadelphia. It was a lawyer in Philadelphia who brought you those arbitration clauses.
I think she has a little more faith in the power of the law for change, perhaps, than you do, maybe given her career.
She has
but-
more impact than I do.
Well, no, impact in different ways. But let me just ask one question, since you talked with some powerfully about questioning the use of the word transformative in talking about art. And I understand and hear your skepticism about that word and what it means. But I am curious to hear what's a better way of thinking about the ways in which we would like art to have a kind of impact? If transformative suggests something that is too quick, too easy, too facile in a certain way, is there a better way of thinking? Is there a better vocabulary? Is there a better ambition that those of us who are concerned about thinking about the ways in which art can contribute to real and embedded and sustained change should be thinking about or aspiring to, even if it isn't easy to get there?
I mean, I think transformation, transformation is a good word. We've just corrupted it by its overuse and using it cheaply, just like words like innovation. I think very often that just becomes a word that's used to give foundations an opportunity to use arbitrary standards for determining where they're going to put their money. Transformative is a good word. We just have to find some real examples, some powerful examples of what transformation looks like, so that we can hold them up when people hang a transformation tag on anything or demand transformation in a time frame that it's just ridiculous. You're going to transform a school system in 3 years? No. So it's I believe in the intention of those words. We just need to be rigorous with ourselves and be honest with ourselves of what real transformation looks like. I spent a year on a think tank with urban bushwomen, the dance company. And Jawale Willa has had this dream for a while of creating a choreographic center for women of color, using as the engine for that center the kind of socially committed work that urban bushwomen has been doing for decades. And in one of the sessions, I was saying, well, sort of what kinds of competencies do you want to develop within this center? Competency, like it was a bad word, and it was, I understood people's reaction to it, because that word has become so fraught with the negativisms of the K-12 education system. But competency is a good word. It's meaningful when we talk about developing these spheres, these habits of mind, these spheres of intelligence that are really critical to doing the kind of work that I know Jawale wants to do. And that just, we aren't born with, most of us aren't born with that. It needs to be honed. We need to see examples. We need to be in an environment where we're constantly challenged and questioned. And we need to name it. We need to name it and call people on it. And competency, innovation, transformation, those aren't bad words, but we need to hold ourselves to making them full and real.
So we have time for one more question. Is that?
And thank you for the introduction.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, both you and Diane. We really appreciate you both. So Germaine, I have a question for you. So I view the work that both you and Diane have shared with us today as work that is incredibly political. The narratives that you both are sharing, I view as very political. You spoke about your personal work in law, and it's corruption to the point that you had to transform the world in a way through a different lens, so through art. And we can say the same about the corruption in politics. So even though these fields are fields that can really perpetuate injustice against marginalized communities. So I'm wondering, you talked a little bit about these alternative systems to create the changes that we seek that do not perpetuate these injustices. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about what those alternative systems might look like.
I think any system can be corrupted. Mm-hmm. And that's the challenge for us to be constantly self-critical, so that we call ourselves on those tendencies, those tendencies to shut down inquiry, to shut down opinions that don't agree with ours, to make people invisible. That can happen in any system. It happens in art, you know it. I think one of the reasons that the Occupy movement didn't go as far as it did was it got corrupted by some of the same, tendencies that corrupt other systems, that people began to want hierarchy, and some voices got shut out, and there were arguments about who's going to lead and who's going to follow. Whatever the system is, I don't think that there's any system that's coherent, that's inherently justice, that is inherently justice-seeking. It's the people within it and the intentions of the people who are in it, and our ability to be reflective and self-critical that makes any institution a justice seeker.
So I'm hearing a real call as we close to that justice seeking tonight, and you've gifted us with so much, you both, in your visit here, and we have some gifts for you. So Student Union President Nia Macklin and DEIS Impact Chair Lindsay Mitnick have some gifts for you, and I think there's an explanation behind one, so if you all want to come up here and do your presentation.
Yay, I've been lusting after one of these.
So mine's the one that requires a slight explanation. We have this group at Brandeis called Tap Brandeis. They're about sustainability and giving water bottles so nobody's using plastic. But we just felt that it was kind of too perfect not to play off of that. So here's your very own Tap Brandeis water bottle.
Hey, thank you. I'll treasure this.
And I just want to take a minute while I have the mic to thank everybody for coming, and also just let you know that the little green sheets that you got are not only surveys, but they are raffle tickets. So if you want a snazzy sweatshirt like we all now have, definitely fill that out and give it to us, because that's the first prize, and it's going to be signed by Germaine. Also, I just want to say that if you are using Instagram or Facebook or social media of any kind to just describe the touching and impactful experience you had here tonight, we ask that you use the hashtag #IamImpact to share with everybody your lasting impact. But otherwise, DEIS Impact isn't over. This is just the middle, so to speak. And we will be continuing through February 7th, this Sunday. So we hope to see you at more events.
And I just want to close by saying that Germaine and Diane, you've truly been the centerpiece of this social justice festival. So thank you all for coming to Brandeis.
Thank you.
Have a great
so much.
evening.
Thank you.